So hey, I'm just gonna have you two just stand up so the Zoomers can see you. Hey, everybody, welcome. This is a fantastic event that we're putting together. We have about 5 people on Zoom and just a handful of students, but this is my English 102 class, and we thought this was a really important issue for them to learn about. So today we have Gloria Menefee, who is sorry, Menefee, that's Menefee, my bad, Gloria Sandoval, who is going to say a little bit more about herself in a little bit, and then Tim and actually go ahead real quick. Do you just want to introduce yourself before you go? Sure. Okay, but we also are here with Tim Noonan, who is an activist and a director of the Beverly
19th War Mutual.
19th War Mutual Aid organization, and also Caroline Schoenberger, who is a phenomenal immigrant rights attorney and attorney in general. But yeah, go ahead, Gloria.
Okay, muchas gracias. Buenos días. I just want to, introduce myself by saying that I was born at the border, so I've had a lot of interest in this issue. And not only that, I live in the Central Valley of California, and we have quite a few people that are undocumented here. And as many of you probably know, there has not been a legit or a human rights version of any immigration reform since 1996. And that one only was actually worsened a lot for people. We can really say that the only opportunity that immigrants here inside the country have had any opportunities was since 1986, which offered an amnesty, an opportunity to legalize in the United States. But since then, so we're seeing an increase of people that have no documentation or temporary documentation. And so, there hasn't been a humanitarian resolution to the issues, to how we're living here in the United States. There are people who own businesses, who have children, U.S. children. There's a mix of families. There's just people not being treated equally. Of course, they don't have a right to vote either. So sometimes the politicians don't care what's going on. The most recent things that have happened is that maybe in the last couple of years has been that there have been many people coming to the border. The thing that we've seen is that they're coming in caravans. They're coming in groups of people, and they found that to be a lot more beneficial because they take care of each other, and then also they kind of throw the coyote or the person in the middle, out of the way. Really, that they're helping each other to try to come to the border safely. Of course, many lose their lives. A lot has been going on with regards to people coming from other countries, not just Mexico. Mexico is, of course, the border, almost a 2,000-mile border with the U.S. And then maybe that's why so many people are using that as an entryway. Unfortunately, they are now the governments of not just the U.S., but of these other Central American countries are actually, what we're saying is moving the border further south, so that there are now checks in other countries, especially like Guatemala and all. They have actually decided to open up centers, supposedly, to make it easier for those people that wish to leave their country. Now, I ask myself, that's a little dumb, because if you are going to declare, excuse me, you're going to declare that you are afraid of living in your country, but yet you have to declare that to your own people there. That seems to me a little risky. But anyways, it's just a sum up of what I've seen over 50 years that I've been, just really keeping an eye on this stuff, is that there is never agreement as to what to do, any solution, to the issues at the border right now. Some people are seeing it as a breaking point. Unfortunately, the promotion and social media is that we're being invaded. We need to stop it or close the border, because there's all this fentanyl and drugs and all kinds of gang members coming across. So of course, the issue of fear is quite an important thing here. I mean, that is very tough to try to erase from people's minds. You know, how are you going to try to stop the corporate media really to stop saying those things, repeating them, even though they don't have any facts on it? As a matter of fact, the Border Patrol Agency themselves have declared that it's not the migrants that are coming, it's actually US citizens that are being caught with some of these fentanyl and drugs. But nevertheless, the issue of people being hungry, being without a place to live, being insecure, wanting a better future is what is forcing people to come to our borders. And you know, it's not a solution to just say, well, we're going to put more National Guard there. We're going to put up the wall. As a matter of fact, Biden or his administration, I should say, has mud on their face because they took back the issue of not building one more foot of the wall. So unfortunately, we can't really say that the Democrats are going to be our saviors, but no, neither have the Republicans. They haven't been able to figure it out year after year after year. But, you know, there's a benefit for US people here on having undocumented people. You know, they pay taxes, but they don't get the benefits of what's going on. I know that charitable groups, you know, kind of like the mutual aid, are really being stretched, you know, and some of the issues that are forcing people to leave their countries have really been issues of foreign policy that our own country has been responsible for. And one that I can think of, but this was back in '94, is the North American Free Trade Agreement that forced people to not be able to live off of their own lands. In other words, the corn that the Mexican corporations needed were cheaper to purchase from the U.S. directly than the people from there. So that grew the corn. But climate change, you know, there's been a lot of like corruption, a lot of issues that have really forced people out of their countries. And so there's now supposedly talks between these countries to try to figure out a solution. But I think the only thing that they're working on is how to stop people from coming and not really doing anything about their humanity and that the things that they need to survive and to have a shot at a future for their family. So I'll leave it there because I think, you know, the other presenters will probably give more information, and hopefully we can talk about question and answers later. Thank you.
Thank you, Gloria. That was beautiful. All right. I
you.
actually had Tim next. Yeah. And then I'm gonna give you the mic so they can hear you. Okay. Is that gonna mess you up?
That's, I just got a couple minutes. I don't think I need to present anything. Do you want me to stand right here then? Is that
Yeah,
right?
let me see. Yeah, just because like that's about where the
Camera hits?
yeah.
Okay.
There you go, good sir. Thank you.
Hello. Yep, you can hear me. That's great. There we are. Hello, my name is Tim Noonan. I started up the 1940 Mutual Aid during the pandemic when everybody was out of work. Everybody was having there was no area where this pandemic did not touch. So when things became a little bit better for ourselves in regards to the pandemic, people started getting back to work and they didn't need a lot of our help in regards to food and that. So when the back in April, when we started seeing families show up at our police station, that's when I believe that we knew we needed to act. Right now in Venezuela, there are young people looking at people like me, that their parents are coming to the decision of our country cannot afford to keep you here. You do not have a future in your country. The country that is born you and that has generation after generation of families, the country cannot afford to be able to be successful in. So that's what's going on in many kitchen tables today. And it's heartbreaking, you know, to see your child who's going to have to leave in order to make a better life for themselves and for their families, where their future does not reside in Venezuela. It now resides in Chicago, Philadelphia, Denver, New York, or elsewhere. So they have to make the arduous trip of going through the place. And when you go into Panama, there's a place called the Darien Gap, and it's a treacherous area. There is a Pan America road, and the only part where it's not paved is the Darien Gap because it's so treacherous and it goes through a jungle. So it's not really accessible. So that's what people and families and have to trek in order to come to make this journey. So it is about a 7-day journey, depending, and there are gangs, and there's sexual abuse, there is robbery. It's as bad as you could imagine is what the Darien Gap is. And then after the Darien Gap, they go into other countries, but then they get to Mexico, where there is trains that head north, and they refer to them as the Beast. It's getting on like you would imagine back in the 1930s, where hobos would be jumping on the trains and then getting on there, and that. So that's what people have to do in order to make it to the journey. And then they get to cross the border, and they submit themselves to the federal government here, is saying, I'm seeking asylum. And then what happens after that? They are promised jobs, they're promised better living and better conditions in other areas such as Chicago, Philadelphia, New York, which is not true. You know, we were not prepared to be able to take this influx of people, though Chicago and Illinois really could use more people living here and paying taxes, but we just weren't prepared, and it's really inhuman to play on people's lives to say there is this better world if you just go up north. And it's a political game between the governor of Texas and the governor in Illinois as who's going to falter first. And then it will get even worse yet when the Democratic National Convention will come. It'll become an overflow with people. So what we're seeing now is bad. What we're going to see in the future is going to be worse. And now we have the winter arriving. We had to scramble and get a warming bus last night to get. We have 50 children that are outside sleeping in tents, and it got down to 40 degrees. So there are families that are trying to make their well-being here so they can move on to the next step, which is a shelter. And after a shelter, then get to get temporary housing. So this is kind of what the situation is of what our friends from our newest neighbors have come to arrive here in Chicago. So I'm speaking today on mutual aid and how that affects. I'm going to just read a definition of mutual aid, if you could bear with me a moment, and then you can see how it reflects in the current situation. Mutual aid is when everyday people get together to meet each other's needs in the shared understanding that the system we live in is not meeting our needs, and that we meet together right now without having any pressure power structures to do the right thing. Mutual aid is an idea, practice that's based on the principles of direct action, cooperation, mutual understanding, and solidarity. Mutual aid is not charity, but building a continuation of a social relations where people give what they can and what they need outside of an unjust system of power, which you know yourself that we're in an unjust system of power. And we need to try to help each other to get through this. We had when we started mutual aid, we have a thing called neighbors helping neighbors. This is never, we're not necessarily, we don't want to be a charity. We want to make sure people are able to get on their feet so they could also move forward and be able to help other people. So what we're looking for is something cyclical. What we do at the 19th Ward Mutual Aid and is when we get people in, we don't get any warning, people are coming. So the people come into the police stations. We're at the 22nd District Police Station. And I don't know if you're familiar with police stations, but there's the lobby isn't that large. So we had up to 60 people that were sleeping there. Right now, we have 156, I think. We had 174 last week. So we had to start buying tents for people to be able to sleep outside. And it's really, I mean, these are children, you know, pregnant women, there's young men too, but so they have, there's nothing, no provisions made for them. They're like dropped off there and it's good luck. So it's really, if it wasn't for groups like a mutual aid, our mutual aid group and others that are trying to triage these issues, these challenges, this would be much more chaotic. And as we see it, as we're taking care of this, trying to make sure that we are trying to take care of this person here that's in front of us, and then their children. And then as this ripples out, their children and grandchildren will know the respect and dignity that they received when they got here for all the disrespect and indignities they received all the way time to get here. So what we're trying to do is to change the direction and the trajectory of this. So, yeah, we do medical clinics every Saturday. We have a group of volunteer doctors. We pick up the costs for prescription drugs and over-the-counter drugs because we can't count on the city or the government to do that. We do donations to be able to cover those costs. We do transportation, being able to get people to doctor's appointments. There's a City Key initiative. I'm not familiar. You're not sure if you're not familiar with it. It's where somebody who has come to the country and doesn't have an ID. This allows them to get an ID so they can open up bank accounts. People are being manipulated and because they are desperate for money. I've seen in front of me where two guys were lowering what they'll get paid an hour just so they could get a job. And they're carrying the cash with them. So they're targets too. And a lot of these places where, you know, everybody knows that they're either carrying cash in their shoe or whatever, that they're targets because they don't have bank accounts. The City Key idea will allow them to get a bank account. So we do get showers for people too, and clothing, and we get air mattresses and bed pads and tents and blankets. We do meals and we do laundry to make sure they're able to get their stuff laundered. There's another thing too, is we're working with the city colleges to do English as a second language. There's an issues with that is in regards to the very organic nature of this migrant situation. Is where will they stay? For one, they don't get Wi-Fi at the police stations. That's not allowed to them. So how can they take the classes? All right, we partner with the public libraries, or we partner with high schools to be able to allow them to be able to have the classes there. And all our mutual aid efforts are not limited just to migrants. It's whoever shows up. We've had some people who have on the unhoused come in and stayed with us for a period of time. And we were able to take care of them, make sure they were fed, and make sure they had some sleeping arrangements too. So and we're not just limited just to the migrant situation, but it's also we're opening up that we're not discriminating where you're from. We have an open heart for all. So there's at the Fort Police Station, they have, you know, what. Oftentimes, if we're not able to get there, because we've been getting a lot of people like after 10 o'clock and 9 o'clock at night and trying to get a group to scramble to be able to triage that situation is really difficult, as you might imagine. And what we're looking to do is to have the city to step up and take responsibility. They call themselves a sanctuary city, a welcome city, prove it.
That's right.
We haven't seen it yet because they're depending on volunteers and good-hearted people who see themselves as the people coming in and to be able to take up the load of this. And then we're at meetings, we're being told, you should do this, you should do that, you should do this from the city and from contractors. You know, and we get indignant because we shouldn't be doing any of this. You should be doing this. So we're having that discussion. on and on. Anyway, so lastly, I want to hit on a point was solutions that we're trying to think of as creative are so wrought with political implications. They're talking about, oh, you're not in my backyard or whatever, and they're doing this tent city thing, that idea. And it's such a terrible idea, and it reminiscent of the internment camps, the Japanese internment camps during World War II. It's just a terrible idea waiting to happen. And how do you handle security? How do you handle sanitation? And how do you handle them not being exploited? You know, all those issues have not been figured out, and they can't be figured out because it's a bad solution. It's the bedrock of a bad solution. Anything you put on top of it is just going to be on sandy ground, so to speak. But the solution really needs to be is housing. It's not like we don't have housing here. We know we've lost a lot of people in the city from moving or and for many reasons. But so there is housing here. Why don't we utilize it? There's 2 buildings over here on Michigan Avenue that they're talking slated for demolition because they want the space. It's owned by the federal government, and it's also on the endangered list for the preservation. Why aren't we talking about those buildings? Why aren't we talking about in Blue Island, Old Metro South? That was all redone for COVID. Why aren't we talking about using that hospital? We have so many spots where people can actually live and live in dignity and be able to raise their children, but we're not thinking in the mind of the people coming in, or not thinking of for the people having a life, and not just thinking of them as numbers. And as Stalin would say, there is the tragedy of one person, and I'm not sure I'm going to misquote this, but when somebody dies, it's a tragedy, but when 1,000 people dies, it's just statistics. And this is what they're looking at. It's just statistics. But we've seen faces of children and of young men and women who are looking desperate, saying, help me. And how can you turn them down?
All right, thank you, too. Oh, thank you. All right, Caroline. Okay.
I'm afraid I'm gonna need that longer than I said today, but
She's an attorney. We'll give her those extra minutes. Oh, my bad. Hang on, not on this.
well, I needed to so I'm gonna talk while we work some of this out. My name's Carolyn Schomburger. I used to teach here. I love my students. I love teaching here. It's very strange how careers get started. I've been through several. I decided to become a lawyer when I was a student at the University of Wisconsin, and Cesar Chavez was organizing people. I was organizing a union at the Memorial Union because I had a boyfriend at the University of Geneva and I wanted to go back and see him. My parents said they weren't going to pay me. And my father got angry at me, you know, how dare you take a job away from someone who needs it? But in the end, of course, I did go back to Europe. I went actually to Belgium and we broke up, but that's women didn't become lawyers at that point. So I went on and got a master's in French. And then women started to become lawyers. But in between, I taught Spanish in rural Virginia, no credentials, 3 years of high school Spanish, 1 year of college. I mixed them up. Y me dice que yo hablo español con un acento francés. People tell me I speak Spanish with a French accent. But I walked into the classroom the first time I was 7. And there were no Asians, Hispanics. There were 2 rows of Black students and 3 rows of white students. And I just looked at everyone and said, I can't teach to that. So I alphabetized everyone. And I figured, okay, if I get fired, it's a good reason. I'll take it. I didn't get fired. And years later, when I was in law school, I was applying for a fellowship and someone said, weren't you afraid the Klan would get you, the Ku Klux Klan? And the bottom line was never even occurred to me. In any event, to cut forward, I spent 25 years, several years as a legal aid lawyer 25 years in government. When I retired, early retirement from government, I went to a nonprofit dealing with immigration. I headed the program, started teaching here, became a full-time faculty member, had a clinic for the students. And then when my mom moved here after my dad died and got sick. I retired from everything, started my own foundation. And that was right before the pandemic. My mom eventually passed as a victim of COVID. It eventually killed her. But I do a lot of volunteer work right now for Chicago Volunteer Legal Services, a great organization. I also do legal consulting for nonprofits. This past year, I was a legal consultant with an organization helping Ukrainians. And I have to tell you, my Ukrainian is non-existent. And there was one occasion where no one could talk to someone coming in, but she had lived in Italy. And I can speak a little bit of Italian. And so was able to communicate. Bottom line is, every job I've had, exception of that one, as a lawyer, has been partially based on the fact that I speak Spanish and I'm not that good. So work on your Spanish. My clients are very nice to me, as opposed to French-speaking people who correct you over everything. But I love both languages. I love the cultures and everything else. So I'm thrilled here, and I'm not going to reiterate what's been said. What is happening here is a catastrophe. It is an absolute catastrophe. Mean, vicious, what is going on, lack of management at every single level.
Right.
And what I'm going to be talking to you about is the immigration options. And that's probably even worse. We've had a system that's been broken for a long time. All they have to do to fix it, if you can show you were here before 72, you could register as a permanent resident. Change the date. Change the date. It's pretty simple to do that. Is it going to be done? Probably not. So let me take you through some of this. Again, because I'm a teacher, I do things in a certain way. So I like to give little examples just because it hits home. So we have a family that crossed the border. Now, it was mentioned when you cross the border, if you ask for asylum, they have to let you in and they give you a court date. So they came in, they're originally from Caracas. I was in Caracas when I was a little kid, and I saw Caracas probably in one of the better times. Beautiful buildings, beautiful things. My parents made sure that I saw around the hills of Caracas, the houses made of cardboard, the houses made of corrugated steel, of kids without shoes. They fled to Mexico, which, as we heard, is horrific. And they want to stay here. And as I mentioned, if you come in, you ask for asylum, they have to let you in. They give you a court date. So we want to talk about some of the options to them. And I want to caution you is there's no one good option. They all have problems. Do they qualify for asylum? Well, we'll go through that. Sorry to say that because you can't make a living in Caracas, that's not a reason in and of itself for asylum. People from Ukraine, the fact that there's a war going on was not enough for them to get asylum. Now, I did interview through an interpreter, which I really hate, people, a nuclear engineer living in Russian occupied Ukraine, who did not want to give up his Ukrainian citizen when pressured by the Russians. He's got a pretty good case. Jehovah's Witnesses from Eastern Ukraine, and they're heavily discriminated against in Russia. Pretty good case. But up until now, just because you're coming from Ukraine in the middle of a war, that's not enough. And I can tell you that things for the Ukrainians are so much better than things for the Venezuelans, the Haitians, the Nicaraguans, the Cubans. So we have asylum. I'm going to go through all this. Temporary protected status, humanitarian parole. Can they get humanitarian parole, employment authorization? Do they have to go to their court date? And what happens if they entered and cannot show they were here? Actually, it should be August. I knew I had to change something, August 31, 2023. So let's go through the options, okay? We can switch to.
Oh, sorry.
No. And mind you, this would take days to do properly, so I'm really doing a summary. So for asylum, within 1 year of entry. Now, there are exceptions, but you have to file. The fact that you came and said, I want asylum isn't enough. You have to file a document and give some kind of proof. And then you can apply for employment authorization, 150 days, they're very backlogged once you file it. And I want to mention that a lot of people who are here have court dates all over the United States. If they don't go, there's going to be an order in absentia probably entered against them. What does that mean? That means they can be picked up at any time and taken out of here. So one of my recommendations at the end is to tell people to go to the immigration court, which is at Monroe and Wabash, and change the court date, at least a year. Oh, and let me add, so employment authorization costs $410. Temporary protected status costs $50. Where are people going to get the money? So you must show you some persecution or credible fear based on 5 categories. It can be past discrimination, or there could be something changing within the country that you have a credible fear of persecution if you go back, based on race, religion, nationality, membership in a particular social group, or political opinion. Again, I don't see war. I don't see the lack of opportunity there. I don't see that at all. So let's go through what a well-founded fear. Mere harassment's not enough. We need serious harm that is threatened. Serious physical harm, threats to life, freedom, torture, rape, assault, slavery, forced prostitution, forced child marriage, forced circumcision, forced female genital mutilation, emotional or psychological harm. And just because you say it doesn't mean it's going to happen. So you have to allege something in here. And when you file your application, then you have what's called a credible fear hearing. This is normally. And that there are 1 million asylum petitions pending. Maybe they'll get to, someone who has already filed maybe in 30 years. But if you're in court, you have to file it as a defense to deportation. Okay, what's a social group? Well, you have to sort of define it. Is it a religion? Is it, LGBTQ? In some countries that can be deaf. Okay, that's a pretty good case. In immigration law, what's bad for you is generally good for the case. I have to explain that to clients. So women, Guatemalan common law marriages where they're forced into marriage, unable to leave the relationship. This helps. This helps a case, a certain family. Witnesses, informants, business owners who are being terrorized. Again, is it a certain neighborhood? Is it a certain type of business? These are things that have to go. So asylum is not an easy bet. Yes, you come in as an asylum seeker, but there's no guarantee. And the people, for the most part, whom I've interviewed, I've done screenings for asylum. When you take on an asylum case, you're looking at like 7 or 8 years. They can get work authorization, but 7 or 8 years, which is very, very difficult. I find it very emotionally very taxing. But when I ask, why did you come here? They say, I wanted a better life, which is very, when you think about everything that's going on in this country, it's very inspiring that people still want to come here, don't you think? So it inspires me, but it's sad Because wanting a better life is not enough, and I'll ask questions, did anyone ever threaten you? Any member of your family? Has there ever been violence? I think in Haiti, where you have neighborhoods controlled by gangs, that might be a sufficient social group if you can prove that there were threats or there were actions or something like that. So again, a social group. Okay, let's go to temporary, so that's asylum. Temporary protected status, which was just extended for people from Venezuela. Extended, you have to re-register. What does that mean? It means that they're not gonna be able to deport you until unless you do something stupid like get arrested for a DUI or do something really stupid. And unfortunately, I've had clients who've done things like that. So again, you have to re-register, and employment authorization, if you already have it, has been automatically extended. Or what you can do is you can register for temporary protected status and employment authorization. And as I said, temporary protected status costs $50. Employment authorization for 110. So it's not permanent status. They can stop temporary protected status, although it exists for some Central American countries for 25 years. But you can get employment authorization, but they have to show that you entered the United States and be admissible. What does that mean? Well, have you ever participated in harassing someone else? Have you ever discriminated? There are whole groups of things that there are exceptions. What can you use to prove you've been here? Well, maybe your immigration papers when they gave you something at the border, a stamp in your passport, medical records, school records, all of these things help. Church records, although saying so-and-so is a member of the congregation is not enough. Member of the congregation since June 2023, it helps. But I believe in putting as much in as possible because you don't know who's going to be reviewing it. So they have to submit certain documentation. I think the next slide. And again, an I-94 that they get. They may also have to appear in person, the fingerprints taken, and it's checked here in the United States, in some cases checked overseas. So when I interview people, I need to know everything. Because that one little thing that someone is embarrassed to tell you is confidential. Unless they tell you I'm gonna hurt someone, then not confidential. But it was interesting working here with students because I would tell them that. And ethically, everything you tell me is confidential unless you plan to hurt someone. So you may have to appear in person. It certainly is an option. But again, remember that everyone here has a court date from Venezuela who came in through the border. And the same thing with people from Nicaragua, Haiti, Cuba, etc. Because if you come in and say, Mr. Customs and Border Patrol person, hi, my name's Carolyn. I'm from Cuba. I want asylum. They have to let you in, but you get a court date. And you have to attend the court date. Now, one of the discussions, and I wish that I had more information on this, is what happens at your court date? Do they stop the court date? What happens if they don't renew temporary protected status and you don't have a court date anymore? There are still a lot of questions, which means when you sit down and you talk to a client, you can't sit there and say, well, I recommend TPS. I recommend this. You have to sit down with them and go through every positive and every negative. Ultimately, they make the decision. They make the decision, count something that you think is utterly crazy. You can't represent them. Although sometimes lawyers do. Okay, so let's go on to humanitarian parole. I don't see anyone talking about humanitarian parole for Venezuela, but it exists. It exists for the, that's how most of the Ukrainians came here. Someone sponsored them. So if they have not crossed the border, they can file, someone here can file a document to bring them in this country under humanitarian parole. And one of the other things I'm not sure about for Ukrainians, you will have the first 90 days, you don't have to have employment authorization, then you have to, in the meantime, get it. I don't know about that for Venezuelans, because no one's talking about humanitarian parole. So someone here, someone at a congregation or a school can sponsor someone from the country. They then have to be accepted. They would be beneficiaries. They would have the supporter, the supporters, the person who applies would have to agree to support them financially. Although we don't know yet how much that's going to be enforced. In the regular course of immigration, you need someone to file what's called an affidavit of support for 10 years. And that has been enforced, but I don't know, because these are somewhat new programs, how this is going to play out for humanitarian parole, even for Ukrainians. Some of the documents from the supporter are showing you have money. I can support someone. And unlike, again, the Ukrainian situation is really interesting. There's no limit on the number of people who could come here. There is for people coming from Venezuela, Cuba, Nicaragua, and Venezuela. So again, when I say something, it's a gold standard. So the documents have got to be filed online, which is actually not a bad thing because you get a response a lot more quickly than if it's by mail. They file. They will have to meet with Customs and Border Patrol in Mexico or whatever country that where they're living and pass muster. There are issues regarding minor children, whether minor children could come. Do they need a legal guardian to bring them? Do they need a parent? Again, there are part of groups where we have actual complaints about this. So is it confusing? Yes, it lasts for 2 years unless extended. So we're all hoping the war in Ukraine ends quickly. Probably will be extended because we hit the 2-year mark in the spring. Anna and Joseph will be told in writing and how to set up their own account. If denied, their supporter can file again. So the beauty of it is that this costs nothing. But you have to you can refile. But again, your supporter has to be willing to refile. Your supporter has to be willing to continue to support you, because again, we don't know how it's going to play out. Okay, let's go to let's
Next
go
one.
to the next slide. Again, I'm going very quickly, and I apologize for that. So to apply for employment authorization, either through temporary protected status or after filing your asylum petition, you have to give proper code, photos. Every jurisdiction where you lived, you have to show proof that you were not convicted of certain crimes or not convicted. And again, the fee is $50 for temporary protected status, $410 for employment authorization. Biographic page of passport, 2 photos, etc. And let's go to other requirements. Again, I'm moving very quickly and sorry about that. People have got to attend court. And if court is not in Chicago, they can go to 55 East Monroe, Tuesdays and Wednesdays between 8:30 and 3, and request the case be transferred to Chicago. The fact that you live in Chicago and your court case is in New York, no. So it is critically important. Okay, let's talk about another subject. We call it in immigration law slang, EWI, enter without inspection. I really hate that term inspection. You have to be inspected. Is someone, going to look at your mouth and look at your ears or something? But that's what it's called. EWI, enter without inspection. If they try to cross the border and are caught, they could be sent back to Mexico. That's, I think, probably what the president is doing right now. People are going back. They could be detained until they can appear before an immigration judge. I've had clients who said they were stopped at the border, and I would ask them, "Cuántos dedos?" I would fingerprint you. How many fingerprints. 2 meant they probably were not formally deported. 10 meant they probably would. We need to do a freedom of information request, which takes forever and is very complicated. They can apply for humanitarian parole if they have a supporter, if they do go back to Mexico. I mean, humanitarian parole is pretty good. I mean, I've seen it through Ukrainians. It's pretty good. Asylum is possible, but again, that's going to make a difference. Another benefit of temporary protected status besides work authorization is that if you entered illegally, you get temporary protected status, you get advanced parole to go back to do something urgent. If you come back in again, that constitutes a lawful entry. What's the problem? Border Patrol may decide not to let you back in. So I don't know what to say other than it's very complex. It's very disheartening. I wish that it were different. And it's not. And I don't see it getting better. And if certain people come back to power, I can see that it's going to be worse. I used to see, in fact, I would take pictures on Michigan Avenue of people wearing immigration. They used to patrol around here. They used to go into courtrooms. So who's going to come forward? This is a fight we had in the state attorney's office. Someone was injured who was undocumented. Immigration said, oh, we'll take care of them, and then after your case, they can go back to their home country. And State Attorney Richard M. Daley said, no, who's going to come forward? He stood up, both the state's attorney and mayor, to immigration. He said, how am I going to get people to come forward if they're going to end up being deported? And at one point in government, I was pulled into the U.S. Attorney's office. And how come you're not cooperating with us? And I kept trying to explain how you're going to get witnesses, et cetera, et cetera. And they wouldn't stop. And I finally said, you know, you're really talking to the wrong person. You need to talk to my boss, Mayor Richard M. Daley. But it's a problem. So here are some legal resources that needs to be completed because it's not completed. What can I tell you about the status of the legal profession? Well, I'm getting a call from the Archdiocese, participating in a call about 1 o'clock, dealing with who's doing what now that we have temporary protected status. Tomorrow morning, the Lawyers Guild, the Catholic Lawyers Guild, everyone is scrambling, trying to figure out how they're going to do this. Chicago Volunteer Legal Services, the Legal Aid Society, Beyond Legal Aid, everyone is, how are we going to do this? The people are being moved around. Who's going to fill out the papers? Should you be filling out the papers for people? Well, that's called the unauthorized practice of law. Okay, maybe people are willing to take the risk. You want to be responsible for getting someone deported? Is that really what you want to do? So you really do need a lawyer or an accredited lay representative, and the Instituto del Progreso Latino does things. Again, Resurrection Project, that again needs to be completed. There are a lot of places, but there's no organization that says, okay, you're staying at the 18th police district and your closest area where you can go for assistance is X or Y. And you may not be staying at the 18th police district very long. You might be going elsewhere. So it is a travesty what is going on. And I know that there are a lot of angry people. I've been here for 20 years. How come I can't get a preliminary authorization? You know what? They're right. We need a completely different immigration system. Are we going to get one? No. People want something that's based on qualifications, degrees. Other people want something else. I don't see this having a good ending. So I'd like to give you something that would make you happy. It's not depressing. I wish I could. I wish I could. It would be thrilling. Other than there are other ways that you could help. You can help with interpreters. You can help by, you know, clothing, food, money to organizations. If you're trying to get people together it is not hurting to let your congressman know that. I saw my congressman at an event and I went and said, so what's being done for the migrants? I'm sure he did not appreciate it. The mayor, the governor, everyone, what's being done? Because what is being done right now is not enough and the legal options are horrific too. So on that happy note, I'm happy to answer any questions. Thank you.
Thank you. And so for any other panelists, Gloria gave a great overview. I'm gonna just spotlight Gloria, and then Tim, I don't know if you can come over here so they can see your face. I was gonna tell you, Caroline, you're getting off camera. You know what, but even so, I love your spirit and the fact that you stood up, historically for immigrants and undocumented people. That was the interesting information about Ukraine. Yeah, I think they can kind of see you.
Do you want to see me?
You know what, scooch over this way. All right, so let's hear some questions. Caroline, I don't know if you want to grab a chair or stand or, perfect. Yeah, let me take the mic over there.
I know my voice is closed because I'm in the classroom, so I may not need the mic. Okay. Good morning, everyone. Well, product on campus. My name is Shanita Thomas, and I'm a professor of African American Studies and History here on this campus. I've been in Chicago all my life, born and raised here. And when you walk down the street, I never imagined how sometimes you just break out into tears. It's not looking at in terms of who they are, but it's looking at them just everybody's God's people. And to see them being treated like that is so disheartening because there are a number of them that are in the African American communities and other stations. They go to grocery stores and things. So my question is, how do you go about obtaining information? Because there are people that I know that have property that are willing to house and accommodate, in exchange in terms of how would it be compensated, things of that nature, in terms to get them off the street.
Well, for humanitarian parole, there is no compensation. So if you want to be a supporter and bring in a beneficiary family, you have to support them. They can apply, at least from Ukraine, they can apply for benefits. But basically, they're on their own. I walk down the street and I see the kids and I see the kids at the 18th District Police Station. And it breaks my heart. And I want to say how come the kids are not in school. But I don't. I just give them money. So how do you get information out to people? That's one of the challenges. Because then their people are being moved around. So I can go to the 18th District Police Station and say, okay, I'm willing to screen. I'm not going to take an asylum case right now. Organizations, how do you do this? This is the whole legal profession in this area is completely, I don't even want to say exhausted because that isn't disheartened. You want to add?
Sure. In regards to housing for that's available, I know that there is some voucher systems that are involved, but also there's where I haven't seen was the vetting of the people who have the housing. So I'm sure there's a process there just to make sure that nobody's taking advantage of anyone. So, but oftentimes I know with us that we have people taking families in, and with mixed results. I've been talking with the Archdiocese of Chicago. I was offered a building to to house migrants over on east side. I was like, okay, that sounds great. And I go, he goes, as long as you pay utilities, fine. I go, okay, well, would the police station get refilled? Well, yeah. Well, now I have two places I need to worry about rather than one. And then I will be now a landlord. And I'll be the custodian of that. So there's an issue in regards to when you get into a landlord-tenant agreement, there is the ability to, as a landlord, you're not supposed to ask about the status. But at the same sense, you got the rights of, you probably could speak about this better than I can, but as a tenant, so there is that issue there. So there can be challenges there, but we do have the housing, and I think there has to be some sort of this isn't rocket science. There needs to be some sort of bridge there. And I believe that the city should come in and be able to provide that bridge, which I think is part of the reason why they think tents is a good idea. You know, rather than trying to fix this issue of saying, all right, let's vet out landlords, make sure this is okay, and then be able to have people there for a period of time, and then to make it move through, and then, or even some sort of system that like a graduated rent, where it starts off, you know, and then as you can build up, you kind of pay back rent, and then when they're able to move out, then it goes back to another person, and then that money moves out. There's a lot of different solutions that I think would be beneficial and that could work, but they're just not thinking of them. And I think a lot of it has to do with they're hard. And what we're doing right now is really hard, but it has to be done. And just to add on, in regards to, I know you were kind of like downer a little bit at the end of yours. What we're going to get from this, we're going to get families, we're going to get future policemen, we're going to get future doctors, we're going to get taxpayers. We are going to be the beneficiaries of this situation. I'm first generation, so we're going to see a lot of dividends that are going to be, that's way more than, yeah. So hopefully we just need to get past this.
And the second question I have for you is, now, I know some individuals who are not migrants, but are so homeless. Do you have any resources for those people as well?
That are not migrants?
That are not migrants, but they're homeless.
Oh, we're homeless, okay.
Could you repeat the question for the Zoomers, Tim?
Yes, so we're looking, she's asking about resources for our Chicago, well, for people here in Chicago who are unhoused and homeless.
Yeah.
We work with a couple groups that it's actually interesting. Well, there are programs that exist that will help the unhoused, but right now the shelter system is now just being so overwhelmed. It's really taking a toll on the Chicagoans that have been here who didn't have homes then. And it's a shame. There's also a thing of, there seems to be a fighting for unlimited resources, and the city seems to be separating Black and brown people to be fighting over those resources, though we're all looking for the same sort of help, and they're pitting us against each other. But who's benefiting? They're benefiting, and then so it's a lose-lose situation. If we gather together and say we demand to have housing, we demand to have healthcare, we demand to have education, those are things that we all need. And where the city would rather divide and to be able to conquer is really not beneficial to Chicago, not beneficial to you or I.
Because the money they're talking about, so many millions of dollars that's coming into sanctuary cities, do we really see that money being utilized?
Oh, it's going to contractors, some well-heeled contractors, actually seemingly getting the money.
Can you tell him how much money that's gonna cost him? And then we have a question in the
Oh,
chat,
sorry.
too. No. How much? I know you've seen the paperwork. Can you talk about that?
Sure.
How much it's gonna cost? Bless you.
I know there was 29 million that was going to Garda World, who was for the tent sort of situation. I remember that. And that's for them to kind of to a lot of these organizations that have these who are protecting or who are gonna be the custodians of shelters and of tent cities. These are the same companies that are doing prisons. So these are not humanitarians. These are not people who are thinking that, oh, or that they're project managers or that. These are prisons. So let's call them what they are, So I think what we're looking for to do is to, let's take a step back and find out how we can manage these without having to result in out-of-state corporations being able to create prisons here in Chicago.
Mhm. So Gloria had a question, and students, please, if you have questions, she wanted to ask, when are people deportable?
When are people deportable? Well, if you come in without a visa, you're deportable. You come in and you don't attend a court date, you're deportable. The step before becoming a United States citizen is to become a lawful permanent resident. You do something stupid, you're deportable. So, but it has to be judged. If you have a court date, although you'll see increased activity by Customs and Border Patrol, they can refuse to let you in. ICE, a few other groups say they can pick you up, detain you, and deport you. And you're going to be paying more of that. The worst thing that you would have, I would hear from judges, that they would be having cases involving domestic violence. And the immigration people would be stopping people in the courthouse. Who's gonna come forward?
All right, we have a question from Jacob, I think, or was it?
I do have a question, but go for it.
All right.
Hold on. I want this call from the hearing. What?
Okay. This is for Tim, right?
It's in.
What I got from it was that essentially that we're not embracing these people. What is it, asylum seekers? We're not embracing them as people or as future residents of Chicago. So they're offering bad solutions, which you said, right? Like 10 cities. They're anything that you build off that is not going to be good. So I guess what would be the correct solution and what would be the right solution for these people? I know you said that I'm sorry, I don't remember. Caroline said that it's a taxing process for these people. It's risky for them because they don't want to do it. And then when the ones that do decide to do it, it's extremely taxing and even for yourself, as speaking to as a lawyer, what would be the solution? And then for myself, other than getting or raising awareness, what is something that I can do? I guess for all of us, what is something that we can do? Other than raising awareness, I guess.
Excellent. Great question. You.
I'm gonna probably answer that reverse way. So from a standpoint of what could be done, there's a lot of police districts, a lot of shelters. There's needs that I know we're all gonna say, oh, you don't have money, but yeah, we do need money. But there is also needs is if you're bilingual, that's really helpful. There is an organization, I can't think of the name of it. We had some Angolan people have come through. Who their native language is Portuguese, and we had some medical issues. So we tapped on. There was an organization on the south side with African dysphoria who's helped us with translation services. So I mean, if you know different languages, we could really help. That would be really helpful. And from the standpoint of doing change of venues, can you drive somebody to the courthouse? We're down here in Morgan Park, which is probably the furthest district. So we get least the number of services from the city than the other districts because they're more centralized, but we're a bit further out. So getting people to go to the courthouse, we have like going to to the doctor's appointments and get people who are now had left District 22 and now lives over here. Can you bring them over here to bring them to get a doctor? And those are really helpful things. Also, just from the standpoint of advocacy, that these are, our brothers and sisters from the South who have come here, to be able to have the same sort of life that we're all having. I'm trying to think of the first part of the question, that I don't think I touched that.
You mentioned that helping neighbor, not necessarily giving charity out, but neighbor helping neighbor.
Yeah, and that's what it is, so we're doing, helping to advocacy, and then helping their police stations, and then be able to help people as they go along, because they don't know Chicago. I mean, who does? But they can help them to navigate the system. In regards to neighbors helping neighbors, and now they've become our new neighbors, so that's how we're helping them. Also give them, if you can, in their own way, is to give them dignity to be able to do their helping themselves. You know what I mean? So I think that's really important too. And that can come in different forms.
Have you ever heard the phrase "there by the grace of God go I"?
Know that one, yeah.
We have an obligation. My grandfather came at the age of 15 from Austria through Ellis Island. It was 1880s. Actually, yeah, he was Austria. I have other Polish ancestors, but Poland who came there, but Poland didn't exist at that point. It was split up. Didn't exist for a while. So he came at 15, he sold shoes, he became a doctor. In New York, I'm a New York immigrant, you can probably tell from my accent. And at one point he went back to Austria with his family. He married my grandmother, whose family came from Poland, and saw the beginning of Hitler. And he never forgot that. He came back to the United States with his Park Avenue fancy office. And I don't know why, but most of his patients were Spanish speaking, and it's sort of a legacy that everyone speaks Spanish. If you're lucky enough to speak Spanish, don't count on the fact that you speak it at home. They have a good Spanish department downstairs, and I think there are legacy classes
yeah.
so that you learn to use one of the 5 different subjunctives in Spanish. I always tell people French is harder until the 3rd year of Spanish, and then it goes off the wall. But if you are fortunate enough to speak a language, people need you. And a lot of the churches, a lot of Hebrew Immigrant Aid Society, Refugee One, there are all kinds of organizations that are helping, either interpreters or services. Again, talk to people, volunteer, get help. Because people need it, and from an advocacy point of view, let's hold our politicians accountable.
Here.
Okay, because this is not acceptable. And I do agree that there appears to be, and it's not only people of color against each other, but people within certain groups saying, I've been here for 20 years, how come I can't get temporary protected status, et cetera. I've been hearing that.
Yeah.
And what's my response? You're right, the system is horrible, but the people are here now. They're here. They're at the corners with their little kids selling candy. They're here. We have an obligation. Other questions?
Actually, Gloria has her hand up, Gloria.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, I just wanted to, to comment a little bit about the, that to remind us that we live in a capitalist system, and that there is no help for people that don't have the money to afford their own things. And this whole immigration has become an industrial complex in its own, because just 1 year of in 2021, the United States Citizen and Immigration Services brought in 4.8 billion with a B. They had a budget with that. They're the ones who kind of apply and interview people, and the refugees for asylum and everything. But I don't think that there's enough help. That's why we're involved with this issue of people not having what they need. Unfortunately, if we don't identify what the crisis is, we're not going to find a solution. But the crisis is not just happening to asylum seekers. the crisis is happening to people that live here, the unhoused, the growing unhoused number. We're also seeing that potential of that competition could come, to a head. We need to be clear that the needs of the immigrants or the people that are newly arrived are the same as the people here. And there has to be a way that we unite our efforts so that no one goes without. And I don't believe that just the compassion of people is gonna be enough. There's gotta be the assistance through our taxpayer monies that help everybody, the migrants and those that are here. I mean, if we agree that there's a crisis in housing, then why isn't anybody talking about eminent domain? Let's take some of these buildings that are needed, especially before the snow starts in Chicago, which
Yeah.
I hear are very, very bad. But just the other thing is, some things are like a Band-Aid approach. We really need a comprehensive change. And that's, I don't think that anyone is really leading that charge, but I think we need to be very careful to be humanitarian and not just make money off of people that have it, because not all immigrants or not all people coming in have that kind of wealth. I mean, even requiring the use of a CBP1 app to come in, they put you in the front of the line. Let's be careful about that kind of thing. It's, people are dying. So we really do need solutions really quickly. So I'm glad the young man asked that question.
Yeah, that was a
Thank
good
you.
point. We have a couple, I don't know, if can you hear me okay with this mic? We have a couple of minutes left, but Chris asked a really profound question. I don't know if we're going to be able to answer it. She says, how do we help build self-sufficiency? And how do we recruit leaders from among the recent arrivals to represent themselves in all these discussions about them? That's from Chris White of the ASC Chicago. Yeah, go ahead.
Okay, well, the first thing that I'm gonna tell people is there's certainly everyday activities. You have to make sure they have housing, clothes, etc. And that people go to school. That is so important to go to school. City colleges, Harold Washington College. I have former students who were lawyers, partners in firms, giving back. Very proud of them, and when I was teaching marketing, just watching someone who may be first generation go on to become a lawyer in a marketing firm, it's fabulous, but people need education. People need to speak English. As much as I am a big supporter of foreign languages, English is still a language we need to speak and write. I don't know what to say other than I just checked. People here before July 31st, 2023 from Venezuela can qualify for temporary protected status. If it came after the 31st, no. So I just wanted to check just to make sure that that was correct, and don't try to give legal advice. There are places out there, and again, legal profession, oh my God, what are we gonna do? How do we do this, et cetera, et cetera? Contact every group. If you don't have money, there are legal aid. Legal Aid Society has programs. And I'm not just talking about migrants. I'm talking about someone who's on the street because they were illegally evicted. Well, one of my first cases as a lawyer was a landlord turning off someone's heat, electricity because they didn't pay rent. So again, and as far as what you can also do is you can pursue your own education. You can aspire, you can achieve, you can do it. I've seen people do it.
And we're gonna end on that positive note because we are at 12:20. I just wanna, I know it's a lot. We should have probably had 2 hours. Want to thank Gloria and Tim and Caroline, and keep the conversation going because this isn't going to stop, right? Thank you, Chris. I see you're offering to do leadership trainings and help facilitate meetings. Be beautiful to have that connection, have your email and Zoom. And let's give them a round of applause. They came on their time to volunteer. The teams did a beautiful job. Thank you, Gloria, for your analysis. And let's see what we can do to connect. Why, have City Colleges be a more active participant in the solution, together. But thank you, everyone.
Thank you very much. Appreciate it.